Good morning and welcome to the Landmarks Preservation Commission's public hearing and public meeting of today, May 2nd, 2023. We'll begin this morning by taking attendance, and I'll ask our General Counsel, Mark Silverman, to call the roll.
Chair Carroll.
Here.
Vice Chair Bland.
Here.
Commissioner Chapin.
Here.
Commissioner Chen.
Here.
Commissioner Chu.
Here.
Commissioner Ginsburg.
Here.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Here.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Here.
Commissioner Lutfi. Commissioner Master.
Here.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
All right. Good morning again and welcome to our public hearing and public meeting today. We have a full agenda. We are going to begin the morning with our research department public hearing agenda, and we will have a hearing on 3 items being proposed for designation by the research department. And then we will move to our preservation department public meeting and public hearing agenda. And we'll begin with a public meeting item, which is an application that has already had a public hearing and is back today with more information. And then we'll move to our public hearing agenda for new applications for work on designated properties. And this meeting is being held via Zoom and live streamed on our YouTube channel. So if you would like to testify on any of the hearing items, you may do so by joining the Zoom meeting at the estimated time, which is shown on our agenda, which can be found on our website, along with the link to the Zoom meeting. And if you would just like to watch the proceedings, you may do so by going to our YouTube channel. And with that, I will turn it over to Caitlin Mus-McHale, our Director of Research, to take us through our public hearing agenda for the research department.
Thank you, Sarah. Good morning. Item number 1 this morning is LP 2669, Firehouse, Engine Company 88, Ladder Company 38 at 2225 Belmont Avenue in the Belmont neighborhood of the Bronx, block 3086, lot 38. Item proposed for a public hearing is the proposed designation of a 1908 Prairie-style firehouse designed by Hertz and Talent. And presenting this item is Lisa Buckley.
Morning. The Engine Company 88, Ladder Company 38 Firehouse was constructed in 1908 to serve the growing population of the Belmont neighborhood of the Bronx. This firehouse, designed by Hertz and Talent, is a rare example of the firm's work in civic architecture. It represents a period following consolidation when New York City employed multiple architecture firms to design firehouses, resulting in a variety of styles, and it is the only known example of a Prairie School influenced design in a New York City firehouse. The firehouse is in the Belmont neighborhood of the Bronx, to the west of the Bronx Park and south of Fordham University. There are currently no designated landmarks in the area, with the exception of portions of the Bronx Zoo located within the park to the east of the neighborhood. This 1901 Sanborn map shows the location where the firehouse would be built in 1908. Consolidation of the 5 boroughs of New York City in 1898 led to an expanded and more widely professionalized firefighting force, phasing out the remaining volunteer fire departments still operating in the outer boroughs. Firefighting infrastructure was needed due to population growth in neighborhoods such as Belmont and led to the construction of many new firehouses in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The turn of the century saw the use of increasingly mechanized firefighting equipment. This firehouse represents the early transition period built to accommodate both horses and mechanized equipment. Because of its relatively narrow mid-block location, living quarters are located on the 2nd and 3rd floors, above twin apparatus bays and facilities designed for horses housed on the ground floor. The firm of Hertz and Talent were engaged to design the firehouse in 1906. The firm was established in 1897 when former École des Beaux-Arts classmates Henry Beaumont Hertz and Hugh Talent joined in a partnership on their return to New York. Hertz and Talent established themselves as theater designers and experts on fireproof building design in the earliest days of the 20th century, designing such notable Broadway theaters as the New Amsterdam Theater and the Booth Theater, both New York City landmarks, and the now gone Helen Hayes Theater. Construction of the Firehouse was completed in 1908. This would be among the last commissions of the partnership, which dissolved in 1911. Hertz and Talent's design for Engine Company 88, Ladder Company 38 is an impressive example of early 20th century civic architecture. It is the city's only known example of a firehouse incorporating prairie-style influenced design. Its planar facade, articulated with deeply set windows and a grand corbelled limestone window enfragement and decorative brickwork executed in both standard and Roman brick. Carved stone signs above the base identify the company. The firehouse retains most of its original feature and has very good integrity. The design of the firehouse suggests that Hertz and Talent may have been influenced by the designs of Frank Lloyd Wright and other Prairie School architects. The Unity Temple was completed in 1906, 2 years prior to the firehouse, and was widely publicized, so Hertz and Talent were certainly aware of Wright's design. Examples of Prairie School influenced firehouses are somewhat rare, but the style was adapted to this use throughout the country, including the firehouse on the right, located in Pittsburgh and also built in 1908. The Engine Company 88, Ladder Company 38 firehouse was constructed during a narrow 15-year window between the classically influenced designs of Napoleon Lebrun and Sons and the adoption of the standardized model firehouse plan. This firehouse, designed by Hertz and Talent, is a rare example of the firm's work in civic architecture and is the only example of Prairie School influenced design in a New York City firehouse. It embraces an innovative and new design expression and takes a more modern design approach as compared to the firm's better-known theater designs. Because of its historical and architectural significance, the Engine Company 88, Ladder Company 38 is proposed as an individual landmark. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, commissioners, do we have any questions before we move to public testimony? All right, let's move to public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. And we'll, as always, start with anyone who signed up in advance and then get to everyone else. But whether or not you signed up in advance, please go ahead and raise your hand so we can find you. And I would turn it over to Gregory Kalla to take us through the testimony.
Yep. Thank you so much, Chair Carroll. We received a few signups beforehand for this item, so we'll be hearing from those individuals first. Our first signup was Doug Mitchell. So Doug Mitchell, I am promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you will have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you. Hello, Doug Mitchell, are you with us?
I am with you. Sorry, I had to unmute and share my video on the bottom there. Pardon me. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. Good morning, and thank you to the distinguished members of the LPC. My name is Doug Mitchell, and I'm a captain with the New York City Fire Department, currently assigned to Ladder Company 38, which shares quarters with Engine Company 88 at 2225 Belmont Avenue in the Bronx. I've been with the department for over 24 years, and I speak to you today as a common voice for all the firefighters and fire officers, past and present, who've been assigned to this great New York City firehouse. Please allow my testimony to be entered into the record supporting the inclusion of Engine 88 and Ladder 38's quarters into the New York City landmark system. Upon my assignment to the firehouse, I recognized the building's stateliness, uniqueness, and beauty. As we began to come out the backside of COVID, I began to research what was required to get this building recognized by more than those who just drove down the block. You may ask yourself how I even thought to do such a thing. In 1990, my father, also an FDNY fire officer, assisted in the research and garnering landmark recognition for his firehouse, Engine Company 65, at 33 West 43rd Street in Manhattan. To my great surprise, several weeks ago, I received a rather random nondescript email from an FDNY headquarters office stating someone was going to be outside taking pictures. And when I looked at the LPC initials on the email chain, my eyes lit up with excitement. And here we are today, a few weeks later. Belmont is a neighborhood in the central section of the Bronx, historically settled as an Irish community in the late 19th century. The advent of the 3rd Avenue L and the subway system made the Bronx more accessible, creating a multicultural influx in the early 1900s. Neighborhoods north and west, once farms and wasteland, became a sea of tenement-style and frame buildings. Today, Belmont is also known as Little Italy of the Bronx, comprised of restaurants, pastry shops, and delicatessens along the bustling Arthur Avenue, its commercial hub and historic epicenter. It also contains the famed Bronx Zoo and esteemed Fordham University. There's a mixture of residential buildings and commercial buildings, most of which came to completion after our beloved Firehouse on Belmont Avenue. As previously stated, the Firehouse was built in 1908 at a time when the fire department was in the beginning of a state of transition from the end of 2 eras. First, the department looked to move away from the horse-drawn firefighter apparatus and motorize the fleet, leaving no need for room to store horses and care for them. Secondly, with the removal of such horses, the department changed the firehouse designs in the 1920s and the 1930s from larger, more elaborate, stately yet functional buildings to utilitarian streamlined design. This Belmont Firehouse was one of the last ones that were designed specifically with the horse-drawn apparatus as its main purpose, and the horses did indeed respond from the Belmont Firehouse. Its apparatus floor plans denotes the stalls for responding horses. The firehouse maintains its hayloft and stable sections for them to rest and recover recover in the rear of the building. These first floor comforts, initially designed for horses, would later be converted into kitchens for firehouse members to eat meals in quarters instead of being released from duty to go home and eat. This Belmont Avenue Firehouse is arguably one of the best kept and historically maintained firehouses in the city, inside and out, with slogans such as "First Due to the Zoo" for Engine 88 and the Bronx All-Stars for Ladder 38. This firehouse has been maintained impeccably and continued to adapt to modern times while remaining true to historic roots each and every year of its life. While I know that we are discussing the framework for the preservation of the character of this beautiful building, it would be remiss of me not to speak briefly of the character of the men and women who have responded in and out of its quarters since its creation. While firefighters and fire officers have a great love for their occupation and a passion for service, the members of this firehouse are indeed as unique and special as the quarters from which they reoperate. Each company, the engine and the ladder company, has one captain, 3 lieutenants, and approximately 25 firefighters assigned to its roster. I'm extremely proud to be the captain of Ladder 38, a great company and a great firehouse. Equally, I am proud to represent the sentiments of the nearly 60 members who work within its walls 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It has served as a working firehouse each and every day. In fact, for over 42,000 continuous days since the formation of both companies on November 15th, 1908, nearly 115 years ago. With nearly 25 years of working in the FDNY in various ranks and in and out of perhaps 100 different firehouses, I have never seen a group of more dedicated public servants, both as individuals and as a team, who take care and maintain their firehouse and their responsibilities to save lives and property in their communities. In the segment of FDNY history that we commonly refer to as the war years, the 1960s through the late 1970s, there was a time of unprecedented fire duty that ravaged sections of the Bronx, Harlem, and Brooklyn. Belmont was not spared, as Engine 88 and Ladder 38 saw prolific amounts of fire duty. Several times, each company ranked in the top 10 for busiest companies in the city for fire responses. In fact, due to sheer fire volume in the early 1970s, a second section of Engine Company 88, known as Engine 88-2, was created to respond and assist to the arduous fire duty tasks facing the nearby neighborhood. Members of Engine 88 and Ladder 38 have responded to and operated some of the most tragic loss of life fires in our department's history. Several where significant numbers of civilian lives were lost, such as the 87 souls who died at the illegal Happy Land Social Club fire on nearby Southern Boulevard, the 2017 Prospect Avenue fire that claimed 13 lives, and the recently tragic Twin Parks fire on 181st Street where 17 people perished. Sadly, far too many lives lost, yet countless lives saved. Over the course of this firehouse's history, 25 members have received individual department medals for bravery for conducting life-saving actions. And Engine 88 and Ladder 38 have each received over 20 unit citations for bravery, ingenuity, and conspicuous service. The quality and character of the physical building that is the Belmont Avenue Firehouse match its members. Strong yet elegant, imposing yet humble, grand yet simple. It is our wish that the firehouse be added to the New York City landmark. It is a deserved honor for a special place that has provided more than just a home to those who serve this great city, but a beacon in its community. I thank you for your time this morning. I thank you for allowing me to provide testimony. It has been my honor to do so. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. And next up, we'll be hearing from Andrea Goldwyn from New York Landmark Conservancy. So Andrea Goldwyn, I am promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you will have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I actually have a statement for this building and the next designation, so I hope that's okay. Good morning, Chair Carroll and Commissioners. I'm Andrea Goldwyn speaking on behalf of the New York Landmarks Conservancy. The Conservancy is pleased to support designation of these two Bronx Fire Department buildings as individual landmarks. Both buildings are fine examples of civic architecture that mark a distinct moment in the history of the Bronx. They were completed in the early 20th century following the development of transportation infrastructure that brought new population to the borough. And these new residents required the construction of new firehouses and support buildings, just as firefighting technology was improving. Hertz and Talent designed the firehouse for Engine Company 88, Ladder Company 38 in a prairie school style, perhaps inspired by Frank Lloyd Wright's designs, but not typical for New York firehouses. The focal point of the red brick facade is a robust horizontal limestone window enframement. It's truly a transitional building, completed in that brief window between two eras of more regimented designs, able to house horses and machines. And here I'll talk about the next designation in advance. The 1915 Fire Alarm Telegraph Bureau is a charming example of the Italian Renaissance style. Located at the edge of Bronx Park, it was designed by prominent architect Frank J. Helmley and mirrors his Brooklyn Central office, which was designated over 50 years ago. These central offices were key components of an expanded communication for the fire department. Furthermore, both buildings have been eligible for listing on the State Register of Historic Places for decades. They were submitted as part of the Conservancy's 1980 Public Building Inventory, a comprehensive study of New York's civic structures. Amazing photos from that era compared to today show that the buildings are little changed and in fine condition, a testament to the stewardship of the fire department. The recognition of the Firehouse and the Fire Alarm Telegraph Bureau are significant for this section of the Bronx, which is severely underserved by landmark designation. We thank the Commission for bringing these proposed designations forward and for the opportunity to express the Conservancy's views.
Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. And next up, we will be hearing from Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. So Lucy Levine, I will be promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. As the citywide advocate for New York's architectural, historical, and cultural neighborhoods, HDC enthusiastically supports the designation of Firehouse Engine Company 88, Ladder Company 38 as an individual landmark. Designed by the firm of Hertz and Talent and completed in the Belmont section of the Bronx in 1908, the Engine Company 88 Firehouse is both a historical testament to the professionalization of the FDNY following the consolidation of all 5 boroughs of New York City in 1898, and a standout architectural example of prairie-style architecture deployed for a civic structure. The Firehouse's location at 2225 Belmont Avenue in the Bronx is as significant as its history and architecture. The Belmont neighborhood is not home to a single landmarked structure. This designation would be the first in a neighborhood with rich cultural history and many buildings worthy of consideration for future designations. Given that LPC committed to focusing on equity and designation and to pursuing landmark designations in the Bronx under its 2021 equity framework, it is time and long overdue for the LPC to turn its attention to Belmont and designate Firehouse Engine Company 88, Ladder Company 38. In March of this year, HDC sent the Landmarks Preservation Commission a list of more than 80 buildings in the Bronx, which we believe merit consideration for landmark status. The list was compiled through HDC's advocacy work done in conjunction with our 6 to Celebrate community partners and our Bronx Borough Landmarks Committee, a consortium of community advocates from across the borough. Scores of properties in the Bronx are historically, architecturally, and culturally significant and worthy of designation. Several districts in the Bronx offer a historical richness and sense of place that deserves preservation. In addition to landmarking the Firehouse Engine Company 88 and the 2 other Bronx sites on the docket today, we look forward to seeing the LPC advance its work on designations in the Bronx and in other areas that have been underpreserved. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. Okay. I am seeing that we do have a sign up. Samuel Brooks, you are in a meeting. If you could please raise your hand to note that you are with us. Okay, great. Thank you so much. So I am promoting you to panelist now. So if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you will have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Greg, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good morning. My name is Samuel Brooks. I am the president of the Mott Haven Historic Districts Association, and I'm also the co-chair of the Bronx Borough Landmarks Committee. I want to thank the panelists, the commissioners, and especially Doug Mitchell for the mention in terms of not only the history, but the community of the Belmont section of the Bronx. Back in 1975, my in-laws moved into Bathgate Avenue, which is between 183rd and 182nd Street. I am extremely familiar on a personal level with Firehouse Engine 88, Ladder 38, because I've visited that area for the last 38 or so years. And more closer in terms of a personal connection to that particular firehouse. Back on March 25th, 1990, there was the devastation fire of the Happy Land fire, which unfortunately we lost. And when I say we, it was my community. I'm from Central America, from Honduras, and the Garifuna community primarily lost 87 members of our community. So I personally have a direct connection because I knew that that was the fire engine that was one of the first responders to that tragic evening there at the Happy Land Social Club. And I'd like to thank the Landmarks Preservation Committee for focusing not just on the Belmont section of the Bronx, but actually focusing on the Bronx overall. I see, and I'm pleased to see 3 items on today's docket, which to me just gives me nothing but excitement. And I am strongly in support not only of Fire Engine 88, but also the other 2 items that are slated for today's docket. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for your testimony. Okay, I am looking through the rest of our attendees list and I do not see any further hands raised. So I will just note for the record that we did receive 9 additional letters of support from individuals. And I will bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
All right, thank you very much. And I do want to thank everyone for your testimony today. In particular, Captain Doug Mitchell. We have also received letters from him on the history and expressing support for designation. And we really do appreciate that, as well as our colleagues at the FDNY with whom we've been working as we move toward this through this process. So thank you all. Commissioners, if there are no questions, I think we'll move to close the hearing now. Seeing any questions, I'm going to ask you all to unmute. Okay, Vice Chair Bland, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Master, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we will bring this item back for a vote in the very near future. And we'll now move to the next item.
Item number 2 this morning is LP 2668, Fire Alarm Telegraph Bureau, Bronx Central Office, 1129 East 180th Street in the Bronx, Block 4333, Lot 1 in part. Item proposed for a public hearing is an Italian Renaissance Revival style civic building designed by Frank J. Helmley for the FDNY Fire Alarm Telegraph Bureau and built from 1913 to 1915. Presenting this item is Mary Ann Percival.
Good morning. The Fire Alarm Telegraph Bureau, Bronx Central Office, was constructed in the early 20th century as the Fire Department of New York's Fire Alarm Telegraph Bureau further decentralized its operations. It was designed in 1913 by the notable Brooklyn architect Frank J. Helmley and completed in 1915. Its intact and highly refined Italian Renaissance Revival style design and prominent siting at the southern edge of Bronx Park lend to its striking presence. Next slide. The Fire Alarm Telegraph Bureau, Bronx Central Office, is located in the southeastern corner of Bronx Park, here indicated by the red star. It is in the vicinity of the designated New York, Westchester, and Boston Railroad Administration Building to the east, the West Farms Soldiers Cemetery to the west, and the Baird Court buildings of the Bronx Zoo to the northwest. Next. Through the 19th century, New York's fire alarm system developed to meet the needs of the growing city. The system of lookouts and watchtowers who alerted the city's volunteer firefighters by a series of bells was enhanced in 1851 when the towers were connected to each other by telegraph. The city's volunteer firefighting companies were replaced in 1865 by the Professional Metropolitan Fire Department, which was succeeded in 1870 by the FDNY. At the same time, communications were improved by the introduction of a fire alarm telegraph system consisting of public alarm boxes connected to a central office from which signals were relayed to the appropriate fire companies. Both the public alarm boxes and the telegraph equipment would evolve in the 20th century. Next. Okay. Following consolidation in 1898, the FDNY's fire alarm telegraph operations centered in Manhattan were no longer sufficient to handle alarms for the entire city. To improve response time, new central offices were established in each borough, capable of directly receiving fire alarms and transmitting the information to the appropriate firehouse. Originally located in existing firehouses, after the creation of the Fire Alarm Telegraph Bureau in 1911, an FDNY building plan included new purpose-built offices for the bureau. The siting of these buildings in large open lots within city-owned parks was intended to protect them from potential hazards that could impact communication. The southeastern corner of Bronx Park was chosen as the site of the Bronx Central Office. Next. Frank J. Helmley was a successful architect in Brooklyn. Trained at Cooper Union, he worked in the offices of McKim, Mead, and White in the early years of his career. Working independently and in partnership with other architects, Helmley's body of work includes residential, commercial, ecclesiastical, and civic structures. Among the public buildings are the Prospect Park Boathouse, Helmley and Huberty, 1904, seen here in the top center. The Brooklyn Central Office, Bureau of the Fire Communications, Helmley, 1913, designated on April the 19th of 1966 in the lower center, and Firehouse Engine Company 268 and Hook and Ladder Company 137, Helmley, 1912 to 13, all of which are New York City landmarks. The Italian Renaissance Revival style Bronx Central Office, along with its twin in Brooklyn, was designed by Helmley in 13, and construction was completed in 1915. The T-shaped building is clad in light brick and topped by a deep terracotta cornice and hipped roof covered in Spanish tiles. Trabeated window openings along the front and side elevations have double architrave surrounds with bracketed lintels. The entrance is similarly treated and features a grillwork transom. A broad stoop leads to a recessed loggia screened by an arcade resting on a balustrade. The building is identified by a non-historic painted sign above the door, and to its side is a bronze dedicatory plaque from the building's opening in 1923. The side facades of the L each feature a trio of large arched window openings set in an arcaded surround. The rear facade has a single arched window with similar decorative treatment. The Fire Alarm Telegraph Bureau Bronx Central Office is located within a tax lot that includes a large area of Bronx Park. The site on which the building is located is used to support important infrastructure to protect public safety and has changed over time. Surrounding the proposed landmark buildings are several small utilitarian structures, equipment, and the aerial tower, which have been installed within the last 20 years. The proposed landmark site consists of the footprint, including all its historic features, and the lawn in front extending to the property line. Little altered from its historical appearance, the Fire Alarm Telegraph Bureau Bronx Central Office is a highly intact example of an Italian Renaissance pavilion adapted for civic needs. It is proposed as an individual landmark for both its architectural and historical significance to the city of New York. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Ann. And we do have some questions. Commissioner Goldblum, please go ahead.
Thank you. So I just wanted to ask about the historic condition at this side of the building that we're seeing in the photograph where the driveway is. Was the access always here? Was this always a paved area?
Yes, as far as I can tell from the old photographs. There was originally a door there on that side.
And the lawn to the left side, that also was original. That's how the building was designed to kind of be seen.
As far as we can tell from the I think we have a 1915 photograph. Kate, if I may ask you to return it. Yeah,
There you go. Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome,
we
sir.
found that the site has changed over time, so I think, and then there have been other structures built on it that serve the purpose. So the building and then that lawn in front really have stayed intact and the same, and so that's what's included in the landmark site.
Thank you.
Commissioner Chapin. Just remember to unmute. Diana, you have to accept my request or unmute, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I kept trying to unmute. Okay, so I want to first say that it's great that we're doing these buildings in the Bronx, which are, it's very nice to see that. I wanted to just ask about, there's a fire alarm station in Queens in Forest Park, which I do not believe is designated yet, and which is a lovely building from 1928. So I hope that's on our agenda somewhere as well.
As a fellow Queensite, I agree.
Yeah, we've also
Thank you.
identified it in we have the research department has thematic surveys that they do as well. And so there's a thematic survey for firehouses and we have certainly identified that one as well. And it's on our radar.
Yeah, these alarm stations are kind of unique and very interesting, I think. I mean, as well, obviously the firehouses are beautiful, but these guys are a little special thing. I think there's one in at least one in Staten Island also.
Yeah,
I remember.
Yes,
correctly.
Commissioner.
Anyway.
There is one, it was built much later in Clove Lake Park. I think it was 1962, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it's not quite as charming as these are.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? All right, we'll move to public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to testify on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. And I will turn it over to Gregory Kala to take us through the testimony.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We received a few signups for this item. So we will first be hearing from Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. So Lucy Levine, I'll be promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. As the citywide advocate for New York's architectural, historical, and cultural neighborhoods, HDC enthusiastically supports the designation of the Fire Alarm and Telegraph Bureau, Bronx Central Office, as an individual landmark. HDC is proud to have worked with the Van Ness-based East Bronx History Forum to submit the request for evaluation for the Fire Alarm and Telegraph Bureau to LPC as part of our 2022 Six to Celebrate program. The forum identified the Bronx Fire Alarm Telegraph Station as a site of significance and preservation priority in Van Ness, alongside a host of other buildings in the neighborhood, which we hope LPC will consider for designation in the near future. HDC and the East Bronx History Forum have already submitted an RFE for the Stokely Carmichael House, and together we are now at work on additional RFEs in the neighborhood. The Fire Alarm and Telegraph Bureau was designed by Frank J. Helmley and completed in 1915. Its sister building, the Brooklyn Fire Alarm and Telegraph Bureau, was also designed by Helmley and is identical in appearance to the Bronx Fire Alarm Telegraph Station, but has enjoyed protection as an individual New York City landmark since 1966. In its designation report for the Brooklyn Bureau, LPC praised the building's architectural integrity and beauty. It is time for the Bronx Fire Alarm Telegraph Station to be given equal recognition and designated as an individual landmark. The Bronx and its buildings deserve the same consideration that the LPC has long given to other boroughs across New York City, especially Manhattan and Brooklyn. The Van Ness neighborhood, where the Bronx Fire Alarm and Telegraph Bureau stands, is home to just one individual landmark and one of the lowest concentration of landmarks per square mile in New York City. The Bronx Fire Alarm Telegraph Station is a crucial addition to the city's landmarks in a neighborhood that has long been underserved by the LPC. This building has been deserving of landmark status since at least 1966, when its sister building was designated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. And I still see that Samuel Brooks and Andrea Goldwyn are in the attendees list. So yes, so I see Samuel Brooks has raised his hand. So I'm promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you again, Gregory, and to the LPC Commission. Once again, as a resident of the South Bronx community since 1975, I am in strong support of the individual designation to the Fire Alarm and Telegraph Bureau building. As I previously mentioned, I'm the president of the Mott Haven Historic Districts Association, as well as the co-chairman of the Bronx Borough Landmarks Commission. As mentioned by the Historic District Council, we compiled a comprehensive list of structures and districts that we submitted to LPC for strong consideration. Again, given the community that we live in, a perfect example, back in 1969, the Mott Haven Historic District was the first landmark district in the Bronx. Overall, it was the 13th in New York City. Greenwich Village was also done back in '69. And given the notoriety, the difference was simply in our zip code. So I am happy and pleased that the Landmark Preservation Committee has turned their attention to, I wouldn't say forgotten borough, because I am so excited to see once again 3 items slated for today on the docket. So I am pleased and excited and encouraged that more and more attention will be given to my beloved borough. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. And to note, Andrea Goldwyn did provide her testimony for this item in the previous testimony, and I do not see any further hands raised. So I will note that we also received 23 additional letters of support from individuals. So I will bring it back to Chair Carroll now.
Great. Thank you very much, Gregory. Right, commissioners, do we have any final questions? All right. Again, I do want to thank everyone for your testimony today. It's really meaningful and helpful as we move through our process. So we'll go ahead and close the hearing today, and again, bring this item back in the very near future for a vote. So Commissioner Jefferson, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So move.
Thank you. And Commissioner Ginsburg, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the hearing's closed, and we look forward to bringing this item back as well. And we'll now move to our final item on the research department's agenda.
Thanks, Sarah. This is item 3, and I just want to note for all of these, and has been mentioned in the testimony, LPC staff has been doing comprehensive survey work in the Bronx, and all of these proposals have come out of that. So I really want to thank the staff that's been working on that. And this next item also has been part of a more thematic study that we've been doing to identify sites associated with important Latino history throughout the city. So item number 3 is LP 2667, the Bronx Opera House at 436 to 442 East 149th Street in the Bronx, block 2293, lot 46 in part. And the item proposed for public hearing is the proposed designation of a 4-story Italian Renaissance Revival style theater building built in 1912 to 13 by George Keister that became home to Latin music clubs through the 1960s and 70s. And presenting this item is Bilge Kosa.
Good morning. I am Bilge Kosa from Research Department. The Bronx Opera House was designed by George Keister in 1912 in the Italian Renaissance Revival style. The building served as a popular entertainment and social gathering center for nearly 50 years, from the early Broadway acts along the subway circuit to becoming one of the most significant cultural venues for the city's growing Latin music scene in the 1960s through early 80s. Bronx Opera House is located at 436 442nd East 149th Street between Bergen Avenue and Brook Avenue in the South Bronx. The Bronx Opera House is located in the oldest major shopping area of the Bronx, in the Melrose area, shown here on a map from 1921. With the opening of the elevated rail line along 3rd Avenue in mid-1880s, the process of urbanization began to transform the Mott Haven, Melrose, and Meridiana sections of the southwestern Bronx. The development only intensified after the arrival of the subway in 1904, and residential housing and small frame structures gave way to new low apartments and large commercial buildings. By the turn of the century, the commercial heart of Melrose, with numerous theaters, shops, and banks, was centered around here, the intersection of East 149th Street, Willis, 3rd, and Melrose Avenues, known as the Hub. The intersection of 149th Street and 3rd Avenue became known as the 42nd Street and Broadway of the Bronx for much of the 20th century. It was the great business center of the North Borough. The developer of the Bronx Opera House was George M. Cohen, known as the man who owns Broadway. Cohen was born in 1878 and died in 1942. He was considered by many to be the first superstar of American show business, working as an actor, composer, playwright, producer, dancer, songwriter, and theater owner, and creating many popular songs such as Yankee Doodle Dandy and Give My Regards to Broadway. Mr. Cohen opened several theaters in the first 2 decades of the 20th century, including the Bronx Opera House as part of the subway circuit. The subway circuit was a term coined to refer to Broadway productions that were tested in the city's outer boroughs before going out on regional or nationwide tours. These shows brought stars like John Lionel and Ethel Barrymore, Julian Eltinge, and Cohen himself to Bronx Opera House. Specialized in design of the theater buildings, George Kaiser's architectural practice was largely active from 1880s through the 1930s. Kaiser designed more than a dozen theater buildings throughout Manhattan and the Bronx, including 2 individually designated New York City landmarks, Velasquez Stuyvesant Theater, built in 1906-1907, and Hertig and Siemens Apollo Theater, built in 1913-1914. The Bronx Opera House is a rare survivor of Kaiser's theater designs, built as a theater and a restaurant building composed of 2 portions. Following the fashion of the era's theater buildings, the front portion of the building, where the main entrance, lobby, restaurants, and a banquet hall were located, was the public face of the Bronx Opera House. The elaborate front facade of this portion was constructed in the Italian Renaissance Revival style, which features a tripartite design with classically inspired ornament, articulated fluted pilasters, and carved tympanums, whereas the rear portion, where the auditorium was located, had a plain facade without any ornament. By the 1960s through 1980s, the second floor banquet hall of the front building served as a major cultural venue, hosting a succession of clubs that were central to the Bronx's innovative and influential Latin music scene. The demographics of this era of the Bronx began to change after World War II, as large numbers of people from Puerto Rico migrated to New York, first settling in East Harlem and soon after in the South Bronx. In 1940, there were approximately 61,000 Puerto Ricans who were living in New York City. In 1950, that number climbed to 245,000 and continued to rise in the following decade. For the Puerto Rican community in the South Bronx, music and dance performances were the expression of their identity and culture. Between the early 1960s through the early 1980s, the second floor banquet hall of the front building of Bronx Opera House was one of the most significant artistic centers in the area, being home to a succession of 3 nightclubs, the Club Caravana, the Bronx Casino, and El Saromar, where the era's major Latin stars, including the Mamba Kings, Machito, Tita Rodriguez, and Tita Puente, as well as Charlie and Eddie Palmieri, Johnny Pacheco, and Hokiano, came to showcase their distinctive cultural output. Seen here are some of the ads for the performances in the venues and a cover of an album inspired by Bronx Casino containing hits that Al Prova played here in the venue. Charlie Palmieri and his brother Eddie Palmieri were recorded live an album at the building entitled Pachanga at Club Caravana in 1961, which increased the club's popularity and established its reputation as the home of Pachanga. The New York Times, the Ballroom magazine, and Seen Here, the Daily News acknowledged the Bronx Opera House as a location that was pivotal to the emergence of the Pachanga dance craze. And pictures here show the Palmieri brothers band rehearsing in the Bronx Opera House ballroom, and Charlie Palmieri and Dagmar Jarwell demonstrate the steps of Pachanga. For several decades, the front building of Bronx Opera House continued to serve the growing Latin community of the South Bronx with dances and concerts, and for many is remembered as an important place of social gathering and expression of Latinx culture. The 1913 plan on the right shows the front and rear portions of the Bronx Opera House. The 2 drawings on the left show the second floor banquet hall in the front portion in 1916 and 1963. This was where the Latin music clubs were located between early 1960s and 80s. The Latin music clubs left the building by the early 1980s, and the former Bronx Opera House was used as a Pentecostal church, Temple de Renovación Espiritual between the 1980s and early 2000s. In 2011, the rear portion of the building where the auditorium was located was demolished, and the new three-story office building was constructed on its place. The front portion, containing the public face of the building on 149th Street, where the former main entrance, lobby, restaurants, and Latin clubs were located, remained and repurposed as the Opera House Hotel in 2013. By the time it was home to Latin music clubs, the window frames and historic marquee were replaced, the historic signage and the top floor balustrades were removed. Rehabilitated during the reuse project, today Bronx Opera House retains its public face with its intact and elaborate facade and reflects its historic use as a theater and is a marker for its cultural history titled Latin Music and Culture, as it continues to contribute to the social life and liveliness of the hub. The landmark site proposed is composed of the historic front portion of the building facing East 149th Street. For nearly 50 years, the Bronx Opera House has served the citizens of the Bronx and New York, once as a popular theater that saw some of the most esteemed Broadway stars of the early 20th century, and then as a social gathering place where Latin music and dance was performed as a cultural expression of the community. Being home to Latin music clubs, Bronx Opera House was an instrumental place that helped spark a dance revolution with famous acts. Due to its architectural quality and cultural significance to the city of New York and borough of the Bronx Opera House is proposed as an individual landmark. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, commissioners, do we have any questions at this time? All right, not seeing any questions, we'll move to the public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand so we can identify you, and I will turn it over to Gregory Kalla to take us through the testimony.
Okay, thank you, Chair Carroll. I'd just like to remind everybody in the meeting who would like to speak, if you could please raise your hands at this moment so I could call on you if you'd like to provide testimony. I will then do so. Yeah, there we go. So I see we have a few signups raising their hands, and the first of which is Sam Brooks. So Sam Brooks, I am promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Once again, my name is Samuel Brooks. I'm the president of the Mott Haven Historic Districts Association. I'm also the co-chairman of the Bronx Borough Landmarks Committee. The Opera House Hotel, incidentally, I walk by it, I would say about 3 to 4 times a week. I live in the Mott Haven East Historic District of the Opera House Hotel, which is on 140th between Willis and Brook Avenue. As I mentioned in my earlier comments, I thank again the Landmarks Preservation Committee, the advocacy of the Historic District Council for advocating and putting a spotlight on our beloved borough. And the Bronx Opera House, I've seen it over the decades undergo its transition, and I am so pleased to actually see this impressive building theater not too far from the Mott Haven East Historic District where I reside. And coincidentally, the Willis Avenue Theater, which was later known as the Casino Theater on Willis Avenue on 138th Street, again, is within a 5-minute walking distance from the Opera House. And that building was designed back in 1922-23 by Eugene de Rosa. And not too far from there, you had the Forum Theater, which is now known as Teatro de Puerto Rico. To sum it up, again, our community has deep cultural history, significance. Some of these structures, such as the Opera House, the Willis Avenue Theater, the Teatro Puerto Rico, meant so much to the Latino culture dating back to the early 50s when Puerto Ricans started immigrating to this part of the Bronx. So once again, I am pleased and I am so grateful to see that the LPC has definitely turned their attention to our community of the Bronx, and looking forward to see more individual landmarks and more historic districts. And with that, I thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. And next up, we'll be hearing from Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. So Lucy Levine, I'll be promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. As the citywide advocate for New York's architectural, historical, and cultural neighborhoods, HDC enthusiastically supports the designation of the Bronx Opera House as an individual landmark. Located at 436 to 442 East 149th Street in the South Bronx, and built as a theater and restaurant between 1912 and 1913, the Bronx Opera House not only represents a history of early 20th century off-Broadway performance featuring such famous names as George M. Cohan and John Barrymore, but also stands as a testament to the Puerto Rican community and culture which grew and flourished in the South Bronx after World War II, whose stories are undertold and underpreserved. Following the Second World War, the Bronx Opera House became home to a series of nightclubs, which all featured Latinx performers. We are glad the LPC has pledged to focus on Bronx landmarks as part of its 2021 equity framework, promising to, quote, ensure diversity and inclusion in its designations, unquote. Designating the Bronx Opera House will be a step toward fulfilling that promise. Currently, the city has identified adaptive reuse and building conversion as a major tenet of its climate resilience and affordability plan, City of Yes. The Bronx Opera House is an important example of adaptive reuse. Today, the building operates as a hotel which anchors the neighborhood while still maintaining the historic features that help make it worthy of landmark status. This flourishing building offers meaningful lessons about how stewardship and reuse of historic resources is a necessary tool for leading the city into a sustainable future. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. And next up, we'll be hearing from Andrea Goldwyn from New York Landmarks Conservancy. So Andrea, I will be promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Good morning, Chair Carroll and Commissioners. I'm Andrea Goldwyn, speaking on behalf of the New York Landmarks Conservancy. The Conservancy is pleased to support designation of the Bronx Opera House as an individual landmark. The Opera House merits designation for both its architecture and its cultural significance to the Bronx. The ornate 1913 Italian Renaissance Revival building was designed by architect George Keister, known for several other prominent theaters. Even with some alterations and the demolition of the rear auditorium, the main building is intact and retains its elaborate masonry facade. The Opera House has always represented the culture of this neighborhood. It was completed just as improved transit brought scores of new residents to the Bronx. Their busy shopping and entertainment destination was the Hub, named for the nearby intersection of several major streets. Entertainer George M. Cohan, the developer, built it as part of the Subway Circuit, a group of theaters that featured touring versions of Broadway shows. By the mid-20th century, the local population had evolved. Many Puerto Ricans moved to the South Bronx and brought new music, dancing, and excitement to the Opera House, which housed several popular nightclubs. They featured well-known Latin stars, including Tito Rodriguez, and brothers Charlie and Eddie Palmieri. The clubs were an integral part of Latin culture in the Bronx, and the Opera House continued to be a music and dance venue central to this community for decades. The building later housed a church and is now a hotel, welcoming tourists who are perhaps interested in learning more about the building's storied past. Despite this rich history, there are few designated landmarks in this section of the Bronx. We thank the Commission for bringing this proposed designation forward and hope there will be many more. Thank you for the opportunity to express the Conservancy's views.
Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. I'm looking through our attendees list now, and I do not see any further hands raised. So I will note for the record that we also received 9 additional letters of support. And with that, I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Thank you very much. And again, thanks to everyone who testified. We really do appreciate the support. Right, commissioners, any final questions on this item? All right, I think we'll go ahead and make a motion to close the hearing. Commissioner Goldblum, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, so the hearing is now closed. And for all of these items, we will continue to accept written testimony up until the scheduled vote, which will be in the very near future. Thank you all again for your participation. We will now move to our Preservation Department public meeting agenda, and I will turn it over to Corey Harala, our Director of Preservation. Yes, Commission Vice Chair Bland.
Sarah, before we leave this piece of today's hearing, I'm just haunted in a way, and I wanted to say how I appreciated the incredible testimony from the fireman that we heard initially. I was affected by it, his articulate warmth. I mean, it really was something the likes of which I've almost never heard in 14 and a half years of being a commissioner. And I wanted to say it, and I'm sorry I didn't think to say it at a time when I'm sure he might have still been listening, and I'm sure he's not now. He's back at work, but I just thought it was remarkable, and I just wanted to say that. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And his letters have been equally moving, and we've just, been really thrilled that he is so supportive and that there's so much pride of their station within the engine company and ladder companies that occupy this station. It's really wonderful. Commissioner Goldblum, please.
Yeah, I 100% echo what Fred said. It was really amazing testimony, to the extent that I think some of that information should go into the designation report. I think some of the the facts, the tie-ins with the history of the Bronx, I think that's culturally significant material, and I think it also suggests to me that when we do these things in the future, to the extent that we can, we try to solicit from these, who knew that there was this, a second generation landmarks fan and embedded in the fire department. I think that's probably not unique. And I think to the extent that we can draw upon their resources to make our already amazing designation report documents even more rich, testaments to the use of these facilities and life of the city, I think it'd be really, really powerful.
Yeah, I agree completely. And of course, with the fire department properties, we work very closely with the assistant commissioner of the facilities and his team, and we do take advantage of the resources, the sort of architectural, historical resources that they have and the information we have. But I think it's just wonderful that we have such personal history right within each station. And I think that is part of our goals of being inclusive in our research. We'll continue to think about how we can do that in a more broad and expansive way. And Kate, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with what you've all just said. And of course, we are working to include that history. And so we're really grateful to Captain Mitchell, who has shared it and has also offered to work with our staff to help with our research and any archival sources that can be referenced as part of the report. So it's wonderful to see how a potential designation can really mean to the people who use a building every day, and to also hear from them what that means to them so that we can reflect that.
Great, thank you all. All right, we'll turn it over to Corey.
Okay, thanks, Sarah, and good morning, everybody. We'll start today's Preservation Department agenda with a public meeting item. It's public meeting item number 1, LPC 22-05759, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 143, Lot 17, 329 Greenwich Street in the Tribeca West Historic District. This is a Queen Anne style store and loft building designed by Samuel A. Warner and built in 1887. The application is to remove cast iron vault lights and granite pavers and replace the sidewalk and platform. This was last presented at the public hearing of October 25th, 2022. No action was taken at that time. The staff will be running the slides, but the applicant is here to answer any questions after we open the proceedings.
Okay, so let's go ahead and open the proceedings right now. Commissioner Chapin, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, so the applicant may speak when they're ready.
Good morning, Commissioners. Caroline Passion, Preservation Staff. This application was last seen at the public hearing of October 25th, 2022, to remove the existing concrete sidewalk and platform and to remove existing granite pavers and the existing cast iron vault lights beneath the concrete sidewalk and platform, which have been covered and concealed from view since at least the time of designation. And they're also proposing to install a new concrete sidewalk and steel-clad platform with an integrated ramp. As discussed last time, the cast iron vaults with concrete installed directly on top of them appear to be heavily damaged, including some missing sections, which can be observed from within the vault. At that time, the commissioners had difficulty understanding the existing conditions, the location of underlying granite joints, and how they relate to the concrete sidewalk above, and asked if any historic fabric could be consolidated or salvaged and retained. The applicant has returned, and in response to your comments, an engineer conducted an inspection and found that there was a continuous crack near the middle of the span, spreading diagonally in several directions. Granite is covered by a poured-in-place concrete slab for the sidewalk, which is also cracked, and removal of the concrete sidewalk slab would result in even further damage and destruction of the granite. The applicant has also keyed in existing condition photos to both sidewalk and cellar vault light panels to clarify the conditions. Finally, the applicant has revised the proposal to include a ramp that has horizontal railings instead of pickets. The architect of record, Angelo Costa of Costa Architecture and Engineering, is here to answer any questions you may have.
Right, thank you. All right, so Mr. Costa, did you want to add something right now or just take questions?
No, don't just take questions. I'll just reinforce the fact that there was some violations, not only did we notice the structural failure, which was quite significant. There was later and earlier violations issued by the city and concerns about immediate repair needed because of structural failure. So these cracks run all the way through from the top of the sidewalk there, which has to be replaced. As you saw from the photographs, it's seriously cracked. The granite below is seriously cracked. There's literally drips of water draining down on you repeatedly when you're down in that sidewalk vault. That steel beam that you're looking at now, there was a section of it that had completely collapsed down, and if you touched it, it turned into ash in your hands. The flanges were gone. And so the web was completely cut through on one end of it. We have a serious structural failure here, and that's what's been the concern for over a year now. And just to reinforce the fact that if we remove that concrete on the top, it is bonded to the granite below. That granite below is going to collapse into that. We put up some temporary shoring into that vault space. And the lights that are there also, the metal frames that support those lights doesn't even support the lights. The glass lights, half of them are missing or fall out. And we're afraid that the concrete was poured on the top of that as well. You can see areas of it that fell through. The concrete is supported actually on some of that frame, but in taking that off, these are gonna fall apart. There's nothing left of that metal. We have to save them in a cardboard box somewhere on the floor, but I think once we try to take them out, reinstalling it will be impossible to reconstruct them in any way. Then that's all. I just want to reinforce that. We have a structural problem here, which I'm very concerned about.
Right, thank you very much. And commissioners, do we have any questions? You know, as we know, this was an application that came to us a while ago, and you know, when we review the removal of cast iron and glass vault lights, we often try to see if there are any salvageable. When we allow the removal of it, we look to see if there are any salvageable portions that could be retained and consolidated and maintained in place. And so the last time we saw this, we did recognize that the historic fabric was underneath concrete and hadn't been visible since the time of designation, and only came to our attention when they applied to do this structural work and address the structural conditions. And then at that point, we identified the cast iron and glass vault lights, and it was brought to the commission. And I think at the last time we saw this, we recognized this was a challenge, but that it hadn't been visible for a long time. But we did ask the applicant to come back with more specific information on the condition of the historic material beneath it, so that we would feel confident in any decision we made. And so the applicant is back with this additional information. So this is the time to please ask any questions you may have about that condition or the extent of it. Yes, Commissioner Chu.
Yes, it appears from the section that part of the issue is also just the elevation. It seems like the elevation of the existing fabric is lower than the current street elevation, and therefore restructuring and applying new concrete on top would bring it to a new level. Can you clarify that?
I'm not sure I understand this question. The old sidewalk was significantly lower than it is. Remember, these
right.
Old buildings usually had a raised platform in front of them, loading docks and you know, and that. The sidewalks on both sides of the building for the entire length of the street has been redone. New concrete sidewalks have been done over the years. I've got to align that with the adjacent neighbors. It's one of the problems is that we do need to put in a handicap ramp, so that that steel platform has to be redone. And you can see in that section, you know, the location of where the vault lights used to be.
Yeah.
As far as that wood frame support to be removed, that is an old, I don't even know what that's doing at this point. It's basically a lateral brace, possibly for that front wall and where the old sidewalk used to be. It's doing nothing other than maybe some temporary support now. So I don't know what you're referring to as far as the level of the sidewalk.
Well, in order to create a proper slope and drainage, a new condition, are you elevating the existing elevation at all? Are you altering that is the question?
No,
no,
we're not.
Okay.
We're matching it. If anything, a section of the ramp is being brought down.
Right.
In front is create the ramp. But no, we're not lowering it. The door sills are where they are. The ramp that's outside, or the platform outside that those doors is right where they are, where it is now. Yeah, so we're not, I see what you mean by saying structural slab, and then it says new sidewalk on the top there.
Right.
And the new beams. That is not a new level. That's a replacement to the same location.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right, so we'll then move to our discussion. And I'll just note that we also did receive letters from the Historic Districts Council and Victorian Society of New York reflecting comments on the proposal that's being shown today. So as I said, we did recognize that this was historic material that has been concealed since designation, and but really did want to understand if there was any salvageable portion that could be reused, either in its current place or in a new spot in the proposal. And the applicants have come back today with more information on that and how the concrete has adhered to both the granite pavers as well as the cast iron and glass vault lights. And they've showed the structural conditions underneath and have a detailed plan with that information as well. They also have revised the design of the railing at the new barrier-free access ramp to have horizontal rails rather than vertical pickets. Which is something that, was a late change and not reflected in the staff's comments. So I think we'll begin our discussion now. This is, something that we have seen a number of times, and we often strive to see if there was anything that we could preserve, but they're challenging. And in some cases, we have allowed for removal, especially when the material's been concealed. So Commissioner Chapin, would you like to start this one?
Sure. I think that this is quite appropriate. It is very much in line with previous proposals of this nature that we've seen. And I think with the horizontal railings that are simplified, it looks, it's a little unclear as to whether one of them might need some further simplification, because the one in the back, but from the drawing. But other than that, I think everything is fine. And I think, our questions about making sure that the vault lights condition have been addressed, and I can approve this as presented.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum?
Yeah, I regretfully agree with Diana. I think it's been established that there's no recourse besides, this seems to be the only way to go here. It's a shame, though. It's a shame on many levels, because first of all, the texture and quality of the material underfoot on a sidewalk is so integral to how people experience a historic district. Cobblestones, bluestone, granite. It's just it's part of what makes a district special. And it would have been so easy and cheap for the owners of this building and for so many other buildings to maintain what they have. But instead they let it go to rot. And then we're stuck with a gun to our heads and we have to approve it because there's no better option. And it really does suck. But I do think it's appropriate.
Right, and this, of course, has been covered for a long, over decades.
Yeah, no, it's true, but it's in general, I'm saying that we see enough of these that it's like, darn, missed opportunity.
Yes. All right, Vice Chair Bland.
Missed opportunity, but long ago, I guess, too. So I'm convinced that salvaging what remains is not reasonable, and therefore this is appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lutfi?
Yeah, I appreciate the fact that the applicant really went back and did their homework to make sure that this wasn't salvageable. And though it's unfortunate, it is what it is. In this particular instance. So I can support this, and it's a pleasure that the applicant went back and made some additional changes to the railing, and I think it looks good.
Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
Yeah, a very straightforward solution, and I can support it.
Commissioner Ginsburg.
As somebody who lives in the neighborhood and walks down this sidewalk frequently, I'm going to be happy that it's going to be repaired. And I appreciate making the entrance handicapped accessible. And so I can support this.
Commissioner Chu.
I would agree with that comment. I think it is a shame to lose that historic sidewalk feel, but I do think that bringing it up to ADA standards is a big plus. I support this application.
Thank you. Commissioner Master.
I agree with the comments. I can find this appropriate.
And Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, same here, especially the comment from Commissioner Chu.
Great. Thank you so much. All right. So I think we have a consensus to approve. Commissioner Chapin, would you read the motion?
Sure. In the matter of a certificate of appropriateness, Borough of Manhattan, LPC 2205759, 329 Greenwich Street, Tribeca West Historic District, a Queen Anne style store and loft building designed by Samuel A. Warner and built in 1887. Application is to remove cast iron vault lights and granite pavers and replace the sidewalk. I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Tribeca West Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the removal of the deteriorated cast iron vault light panels and granite pavers is warranted by their deteriorated and unsound condition and will not result in a perceptible change in the streetscape, as the vault light panels and granite pavers were covered with concrete at the time of designation. That reconstructing the sidewalk and deteriorated vault will support the long-term preservation of the building by reducing water infiltration and potential structural damage. That the installation of a new steel diamond plate platform with ramp, steps, and metal railings will recall the placement and material of the historic platform and provide barrier-free access to the building. That the new concrete paving will be tinted and scored to match the concrete sidewalk at either side of the property, and that the proposed work will not detract from the building, the streetscape, or the historic district.
Thank you. And Vice Chair Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right, Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Master.
Aye.
With 10 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
That's great. That's approved. Thank you very much. And we'll move to the next item.
Okay, and we'll now move to our public hearing item portion of the agenda, starting with public hearing item number 1, LPC 23-02917. This is an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Queens, Block 10302, Lot 54, 112-50, 179th Street in the Addisley Park Historic District. This is a colonial revival style house designed by William Edgar Moran, built in 1920 to 21. The application is to install solar panels.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing and the staff will be taking you through the presentation. Brian, if you could just click on your screen, you'll have control. Please state your name for the record and you may begin.
All right, good morning, commissioners. Brian Blazak, preservation staff. The subject property is 11250 179th Street in the Addisley Park Historic District. So this proposal is to install a solar panel array on the rear southwest facing pitched roof. And this slide locates the property within the Addisley Park Historic District. And the cut sheets show that the panels will be black on black and have a skirt to hide any equipment underneath the panels, which is in line with other commission approved visible solar panel arrays. And you can see those details on the bottom left. And this shows here that none of the panels will be visible on the front elevation of the building. And then the proposed rear elevation shows the layout of the solar panel arrays at the rear of the roof. A conduit will run the length of the side facade to the location of the AC disconnect on the first floor. And then these side elevations show that the array will have a low profile and will be mounted parallel to the pitch of the roof. And this shows that again, and also the location of the proposed conduit. And then a sightline section shows that, again, there'll be no visibility over the front facade. And then this site plan shows locations where there will be visibility in red, mainly through gaps in buildings from 178th place. The green dots show areas where there will not be any visibility. And finally, just a blow up with some photo montages of the arrays, how they're rendered. And the view on the right there, that's just showing the location of the AC disconnect. And again, those 3 red dots show that they'll be visible through gaps within buildings or between buildings, partially obscured by vegetation and leaves. The applicant is here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. All right, do we have any questions for the applicant? All right, I don't see any questions, so why don't we move to public testimony? If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. And I'll turn it over to Gregory Kalla to see if we have any testimony.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We did not receive any signups for this item. I'm looking through our attendees list right now, and I do not see any hands raised. Give it one more moment, and no hands raised. So I will just note for the record that Queens Community Board 12 does recommend approval, and I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Thank you very much. All right, so we have Community Board 12 recommends approval, no other testimony. And before we move to our discussion, I just want to ask the applicant if you'd like to add anything at this time.
Hello, everyone. Not at this time. We don't have to add anything. Just to thank everyone here to have attention on this job. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, commissioners, if you can all unmute yourself, we'll move to close the hearing and begin our discussion. All right, Vice Chair Bland, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the hearing's closed and we'll begin our discussion for this application for these solar panels located on the back of the roof, visible through some gap views between other buildings behind and around it. Commissioner Ginsburg, would you like to start this one?
Very much so. Thank you. Given that I believe climate change is the existential issue of our times and moving ahead, I think projects like this are extremely important to wean ourselves off of fossil fuel, and the oblique views of these panels will not detract from the historic nature of the district, and I think this is totally approvable.
Great, thank you very much. Vice Chair Bland?
Yes. We've been confronted with this issue increasingly over time, and for the reasons that Mark Ginsburg has just suggested, it's crucial that we figure out how to accept these as part of our historic districts. I think this is one of the least offensive visually, that we've seen.
Yeah.
It's going to take some of us a little longer to appreciate, visually appreciate that these are acceptable. in any event, this is certainly easily approvable based on our recent record. And I think more challenging are the ones that we see over the relatively flat roofs of townhouses and brownstone kinds of neighborhoods. But when they're applied to the back of a slope roof individual house like this, I think it's much easier to approve. But as Commissioner Ginsburg has just said, it's important that we make these transitions over time. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
Oh, I can approve this. It's in the back of the house. And mechanical system, the systems are in the back of the house. My only concern was that the way it was placed on the roof, the panel system, instead of a geometric system, instead of a geometric pattern, it's just, it could be simplified. But I can approve it the way it is.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lutfi.
I agree with my fellow commissioners and just want to build a little bit on what Mark and Fred said. I do think that as a commission, now might be the time for us to start exploring with an eye toward the future, what makes sense. I mean, I think in terms of these panels, I think we are going to have to accept more visibility if we want to enable applicants to make their homes more energy efficient. And it's not only homes. I think that we're going to be, hearing from apartment buildings as well. And also, in addition to panels, some will be coming to us with wind. So I don't know. I would like to, not only can I approve this, but I'd like to make that recommendation that we look at it from a big picture perspective from now to the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Commissioner Goldblum.
Agreed on all fronts. As I've said before, people in landmark, we should be happy to be seeing these things on roofs. It's a sign that the owners are responsible, that they're caring for their landmark property in a responsible way, and it's part of our world now. I'm working on this project with students at CCNY on that relates to a individual landmark building, and they're all going, oh, but the question comes, what about solar? You got to do solar. It's to power the building, and they said, oh, but Landmarks isn't going to accept that. Solar panels on a landmark building. And it's like, guys, we approve it all the time, and it's something that I think it's a point of pride. I think that the commission has taken an incredibly helpful stance towards it. We want to facilitate these and see them flourish.
Thank you so much. That's true. And thank you for educating your students and the public every opportunity we have. Commissioner Chu.
I think this is definitely appropriate. Yeah.
Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I'm just so proud of this commission that, so conscientious, starting with Commissioner Mark Ginsburg. And, and I agree with all the comments from all the commissioners.
Commissioner Master.
I echo these sentiments. I'm extremely proud to be approving something like this, that we are moving towards solar. I think it's absolutely appropriate.
Great. Thank you all, commissioners. And as you know, as we recently calendared amendments to our draft rules, including the rules that allow solar panels on buildings with flat roofs to include applications such as this. So we'll be holding a public hearing, as you know, on that on May 23rd. So but this one is before us today and pre-new rules. So we will go ahead and make a motion to approve it. I have a consensus here. Commissioner Ginsburg, would you make that motion?
I will. I just want to say before that, I appreciate what the other commissioners say, and Commissioner Lufty's point about wind. I've looked at wind. Wind doesn't work very well in New York, except for maybe on Rockaway and Coney Island beaches. So we may have less of that. And with that said, with regards to LPC 2302-917-112-50, 179th Street, Adelaide Park Historic District, a colonial revival style house designed by William Edgar Moran and built in 1920-21. Application is to install solar panels. Just 1 second here. I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Adderley Park Historic District. Adderley Park Historic District. Staff also note, I also note that the installation of visible solar panels on pitched roofs of freestanding houses may be unavoidable in cases such as this one due to the code requirements, site conditions, and the necessity of the panels to face south for proper performance and economic viability. That the proposed work will not damage or eliminate any significant features, that the solar panels will be seen as background elements and incidental views in conjunction with secondary facades of this house and neighboring houses, and the installation will not call undue attention to itself. That the solar panels will have a low profile and will be mounted parallel to the pitch of the roof, thereby maintaining the form of the historic roof profile. That the simple rectilinear configuration and dark uniform appearance of the solar panels and framing elements will have a neutral presence on the roof. That the installation will clearly be visually differentiated as modern, renewable energy installation and reversible in the long term, and that the proposed work will not detract from the special architectural historic character of the building in the historic neighborhood, historic district.
Thank you. And Vice Chair Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right, Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum. Aye. Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi. Commissioner Lutfi? Stepped away.
No, sorry, I couldn't unmute. Aye.
Commissioner Master.
Aye.
With 10 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
Right, that's approved. Thank you. I'll move to the next item now.
The next item is public hearing item number 2, LPC 23-08020, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 47, Lot 7501, 120 Broadway, the Equitable Building, individual landmark. This is a Beaux-Arts-style office building designed by E.R. Graham and built in 1913-15. The application is to modify entrance infill and to provide barrier-free access.
Hey, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. Willa, you now have control of the presentation. You just need to click on your screen, and then you can advance the slides using your arrow keys or your mouse. Please state your name for the record. You may begin.
My name is Willia Gaia, and also on this call is Kenneth, who is from TPG. So I'll start the presentation, and as needed, we will he'll come in and provide some additional information. Okay, so basically what we are doing, we are replacing the existing storefront entry to make it ADA accessible. As you can see probably here from this picture, there is a step and just a little portion that is ramp, but it's not enough for a wheelchair to go through. So, okay. Well, sorry. Okay, there. Okay, so so this is the building in 1919. Initially, the ground floor commercial spaces entry was through the main entry corridor. Since then, the building has provided the commercial spaces with their own exterior entryway, which you will see. This is more historic pictures. And here is the existing condition now. These are the commercial spaces with the exterior storefronts now available. And this is the main entryway into the building. Okay. Okay, so this is our space. Our space is right here to the left of the main entryway. So as it stands right now, there's a revolving door. This is a step to go up, and there's only one entry door here into the space. So, and what we are proposing is to have it a ramp. It's sloped to the double door, 24-hour vestibule, to have, which will be controlled by access to a card to get in for security, and there'll be 2 ATM machines in the vestibule, and then there'll be another double door to get into the branch itself. This is a more blow up of this picture. So basically, we are matching the existing material and color that it's already there. This is to show what we will be removing, which is, as I said, the whole existing storefront. So that's the revolving door, the existing door here, and then the step that is here will be removing that. The existing step with the granite finish to be removed, an existing ramp with the granite finish to be removed as well. This portion here, which is only 3 feet and 2 inches. So this is it from an elevation here perspective. And this is the proposed, as you could see here, it's ramp, making sure it's ADA compliance, everything matching the existing finish that is there right now. This is the proposed elevation. So basically that'll be like the double doors. The transium will not be touched. It'll remain existing. And this will be a fixed window. And we'll have a mullion here to abide by the code, since it's a transparent glass window, to make sure that nobody goes walking into the glass. So that is why we're proposing the mullion there. These will be the ATM machines inside the vestibule. Here. So this is it right here. Existing. That's the proposed, how it's going to look. And these are some close-up pictures. Again, this is the step we'll be removing to ramp this. As you can see here. And by the way, this existing ramp is not in compliance as it stands. So these are our materials, which will be matching the existing that's there right now. Here. So right now, as it is, the storefront is a dark bronze metal finish, and we'll be matching the same exact metal finish. And we will be putting existing granite stone down there as well. This is on the other side. This is a Citibank. Okay, this is it. Existing entrance. So these are the other entrance along the exterior of the building on other sides. And that's it.
Okay, and so these other entrances also have a Duronotic bronze finish, right?
Yeah, these are dark bronze finish, these as well.
Okay, and then the storefront windows flanking your entrance, what finish is that? Are those, excuse me?
These right here. Okay.
No, yeah, the two big windows. No, not within your bay. The windows on either side of your bay, yeah.
Yeah, so those are dark bronze metal as well.
Okay.
If I could just clarify on this point, that this building underwent a campaign several years back where almost all of the storefronts are actually stainless steel, and they were given a brown paint finish on top of the stainless steel to remain. So very few are actually an anodized bronze material. They're stainless steel with a brown bronze look sort of paint finish on top. So that's the case for, I think, 90% of the storefronts around the building.
Okay.
And that's because we determined that those were the historic colors?
Well, there was no evidence of the historic infill left to do any paint tests. So that brownish color was just based off of knowledge of different colors that were possible for a building of this style and period. There were definitely bronze entrances at several locations. One of which is actually, I think the two main ones on Broadway and Nassau have since been restored with bronze. But the storefronts themselves were replaced long ago with the stainless steel, and they were allowed to be painted a dark brown color to sort of make them more harmonious with the main entrances.
Okay. Other questions?
Yeah, I do have a question regarding that same point. The stainless steel painted is what most of the existing fabric there is now. And is this says dark bronze metal, but what kind of, is this aluminum shop finished metal?
Kenneth,
Yes,
would
I'll
you like
jump
to
in.
elaborate?
Yes. Yeah, this will be aluminum. It will be baked enamel, dark bronze to match close as possible to the existing material.
Okay. And my question really is related to, again, the stainless steel comment that Corey was mentioning. Corey, was that a standard that was to be set? Because the stainless steel mullion is a much higher quality, of course, than aluminum is.
No, I think that was a campaign put forth by the owner to improve the appearance of the building, not so much kind of the choice of the underlying material, which again had been there for some time. So I do think what the applicant is proposing, if it is a baked enamel finish, could be color matched to the coating that was used on top of the stainless steel storefronts to blend these seamlessly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg?
Yes, can we go to the elevation of the proposed elevation?
Okay, hold on.
Okay.
Oh, here, okay.
Right. My question is, I understand you felt it useful to divide up the glass with mullions, but couldn't you just put some decals on the glass to prevent people from walking into it and potentially have a glass closer in proportion to what's at the entrance and other windows? This seems very small and broken up, and I'm not sure there's a reason to do that.
We could put distraction markers. There is an exception, I believe in code in section 24 that can allow us to if needed.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson? Just remember to unmute.
Thank you. Could you go back to your first rendering that we started with, that
First one, okay.
The perspective rendering. Keep going, keep going. I think it's A100.
Okay.
I just wanted to check the rendering color. Here.
These are the current photos. Mhm.
Okay, and these are actually photos on the left-hand side. It's actually a photo, right?
Yeah, so this,
Yeah,
okay,
That's not a
Kenneth.
photo, that's a rendering. The image on the right is a photograph.
Yes.
Oh, right,
Yeah,
right. So
correct.
I'm checking the mullions, the vertical and horizontal mullions. Is that what's there now? Or that's going to be in the rendering at some point? Because your drawings don't show the mullions at all.
No, those vertical mullions are not existing, and we're not proposing to add those. Those renderings are from, I guess, a longer time.
Oh, so this image doesn't exist anymore. Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
Mhm.
All right, other questions? Okay, let's move to public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand so that we can identify you, and I will turn it over to Gregory Kalla to take us through the testimony.
Okay, thank you, Chair Carroll. We received one sign up in advance for this item, so we'll be hearing from them first. Our sign up was from Christina Conroy from the BSNY. So Christina Conroy, I am promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Christina Conroy for the Victorian Society, New York. Now, founded in 1966 in New York City, the Victorian Society in America is dedicated to fostering the appreciation and preservation of our 19th and early 20th century heritage. The New York chapter promotes preservation of our historic districts, individual and scenic landmarks, interiors, and civic art. Now, we found the presentation material for this application so lacking in clarity that it was difficult to prepare testimony. The existing and proposed elevations of the storefront bay in question are too small and lacking in detail, making it difficult to understand the proposed design. There is no detailed view that would show us what the historic storefronts were like to help guide a new design. So in our written testimony, we have provided photographs from 1915 and 1930. As would be expected, the ground floor once had a design commensurate with the rest of the building. We know that the Commission can't require restoration of historic features missing at the time of designation. Nonetheless, we don't understand how such a pedestrian storefront design using anodized aluminum can be an appropriate standard for a building of this consequence. The existing step and ramp and proposed replacement ramp are referred to variously as granite, granite tile, and granite finish. Which is it? At least part of the existing step looks historic. The original step here would have been solid granite in one piece or possibly 2 or 3 sections. We don't think it would be inappropriate to replace the existing material with a single ramp of granite, but it would have to be a single large slab of stone or perhaps 2 or 3. The different material with a granite finish or granite tiles, which implies small pavers on concrete, would be inappropriate, and no details on this new ramp are provided. Finally, we think the ramp may not be ADA compliant as the door swing interferes with the required 5-foot level landing. That should be verified to ensure that the applicant doesn't have to return with a revision. We suggest that a decision on this application await resubmission of an improved and properly documented proposal. Thank you, Commissioners.
Okay. Thank you so much for your testimony. I am looking through our attendees list now, and I do not see any further hands raised. So I will just note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 1 recommends denial, and that LPC reevaluates the currently approved master plan such that the plan promotes thoughtful and unified design for future replacement storefront for the ground floor. And I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you very much. And I just, when I first, before I turn it back to the applicant, clarify the issue of the master plan raised by the community board. Corey, there is no current master plan for this building, correct?
Not for storefronts or anything at the ground level. There's master plans for HVAC and windows at the upper floors.
Okay, so in the past, we did do a campaign, approved a campaign to improve the appearance of the existing storefronts by painting them. And we're just looking at this one discrete entry today. All right, and I'd like to ask the applicant to, if you'd like to respond to the testimony that we've heard. We've heard a lot about materials from the Victorian Society, and then there may be other issues raised at the community board that you'd like to address.
Kenneth, I'll let you talk about the materials.
As it relates to the material, we will in fact replace the granite slab with granite slab, won't be tile. The finish as it relates to aluminum, we're more than willing to step it up to stainless steel to match existing. And of course, do the baked enamel dark bronze. We have no objections to that.
All right, commissioners, do we have any final questions? All right, I'm going to ask you all to unmute now so we can close the hearing and move to our discussion. And as we do that, I'll just note for the record that Vice Chair Bland is recused on this item and has not been present for the presentation or the questions and won't be present for the discussion. So Commissioner Chapin, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And Commissioner Chu, would you like to start this one?
Sure. So it looks like the only thing that we're reviewing now is this one entry, from my understanding. I do agree that the documentation was a little hard to understand what the actual proposal was. But that in mind, it looks like the plan revision is acceptable. I think if the applicant is willing to look at with staff a more appropriate finish for the storefront system that is needed, I'd agree that anodized aluminum is not appropriate for this landmark building. I do think that the granite ramp issue does need to be investigated. I did not see it and I hope that staff can work with them to ensure that this is in fact, I would assume, a 1 in 20 slope in order to avoid handrails and many other issues that you would otherwise need. But that would be crucial, I think, in determining whether this is actually viable. I do agree with Commissioner Ginsburg's comment about the mullion on the horizontal. I think that it is a disturbance, and there's no others that have that. They're all vertical full heights. So I would ask the applicant to look at ways to avoid doing that.
Okay.
Otherwise, great. I think that it would be appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
I can agree that the plan moves are appropriate. I think that they should go back and look at the elevation and work with staff to come up with a better solution than what I see here.
Do you mean on the configuration of the window?
Correct, yes. And
okay.
The finish.
And the finish. Okay, great. All right, Commissioner Goldblum.
Thanks. First off, you'll notice in this image that there's a brown panel to the far right of the windows, which is a blank piece of wall, which is a continuation of the side panel, which will also be a blank piece of anodized aluminum, I assume. I think that's an unfortunate mistake that should be corrected. I think you can probably move that. That's like an area of the machinery closet for the ATMs. I think that should be eliminated, and it should be as full glass as it was, having a blank panel there just seems like an invitation for abuse. I think the notion of asking them to up the material to stainless steel and then go paint it brown is kind of nuts. I mean, you know, the whole purpose of stainless steel is that it stays the way it is forever, and you don't have to mess with it. And now you're going to put a painted coat on it. I just think that's, I don't know.
Yeah, just to be clear, I think that the applicant has said that they would do a baked enameled finish on aluminum. And I think so far the commissioners who've spoken are comfortable with that as long as they work with the staff on that finish.
I mean, it's a shame. This building really does need I agree with Ms. Conway about the absence of historical material to help guide us on this. I think it was unfortunate that was not included in the documentation. But if there was ever a building that needed a master plan, it's this one, and it's too bad that this is happening in this piecemeal way. I also think that, you know, at the base of this glorious building, which is so rich, that the use of Duranotic or Duranotic colored brown is unfortunate. I can find it appropriate because it's relatively consistent, but I would urge the you know, any contacts that we have with the commission, with the owners of this building, urge them to do a master plan. I agree that the mullions are a mistake. It should be removed. It should be a simple, large piece of glass.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lutfi?
Hold on. Yeah, I think my fellow commissioners have made a lot of comments that I agree with. And I do, and the most important being that it is a shame that the material changes in general at the base of the building are sort of a shame. It is an important building. Michael just made a very interesting recommendation about that panel at the edge, that it should be glass, and I think that's a good idea. And I mean, this whole question of aluminum versus steel, you know, I could go either way, but it's the finishes that I think ultimately that the applicant has to work with staff very closely on, as well as the slope of this ramp. So I'm in agreement overall.
Okay, great. Commissioner Ginsburg?
In general, I'm in agreement with the other comments. I think if the slope is less than 1 in 20, it is all right at the doors, and you don't need the 5-foot level platform. And I think getting rid of the mullions and then working with staff to match the color makes sense.
Okay. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I agree with the, this is such an important building. This is the 1916 that gave rise to the New York City zoning. And I agree with the commissioner's comment about the finish. And having been a victim of that, especially the remarks about the marker, the distracted marker, having been a victim walking straight through the glass, that is a side note. But I think the applicant should work with the staff. Michael, as usual, makes a lot of good observations and comments about the side panel. But I won't play designer here. I'll defer to the rest and for the details.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Master?
I think the other commissioners made a lot of good comments that I agree with. I don't have anything more to add.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, so I think we can move to approve this discrete application for this door.
Sarah?
Oh, Diana, I'm so sorry. I didn't have you written down. So please forgive me. Please go ahead.
Okay, it's the second time you missed me though, so I thought I better call attention.
Thank you.
Anyway, I agree with the other commissioners, and I think that the finish should be not be aluminum, and the panels and the glass should also be should be worked on with the staff to correspond with the other doorways and on the building. So that's it.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. My apologies for that. Okay, so I think we can make a motion to approve it with the condition that they could work with the staff to confirm that the finish will be a baked enameled finish that will match the existing storefront infill and the color of the existing storefront infill, and that they work with the staff on the configuration of the window, including eliminating to simplify it, including eliminating the side panel and mullions and simplifying it to make it relate better to the rest of the storefronts. And I think that with respect to the ramp, this is the proposal without railings, and they can certainly work with the staff to confirm that they can do less than 1 to 20, but if it does need to have railings, it would have to come back to us anyway. So I think we'll approve it as is today with the condition that they work with the staff to restudy the finish and the configuration of the windows. So Commissioner Chu, would you be able to make that motion?
Sure. Okay. In regards to LPC 2308020120 Broadway, the Equitable Building, which is an individual landmark, a Beaux-Arts style office building designed by E.R. Graham and built in 1913 to 1915. Application is to modify entrance infill to provide barrier-free access. We recommend approval with modifications, finding that the proposed ramp surface, paired entry doors, and door actuator will provide barrier-free access into the commercial space in the least intrusive method possible without eliminating any significant architectural features of the building, that the recessed placement of the infill will be slightly deeper than the current condition, that this change will not be readily perceptible from the sidewalk due to prominence of the upper transom above, that the materials and bronze color of the proposed aluminum entrance infill be consistent with the modern storefront and entrance infill building wide, that the new granite paving at the entrance will match the historic granite paving in terms of color, texture, and finish, and that the proposed work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of this individual landmark. You find that, however, the proposed configuration and finish of the infill does not match the other storefront infill at the building's base. We recommend that the applicant work with staff to ensure that the configuration of the window and metal panel to the side of the doors is in keeping with other entrance infill this type, as suggested, recommending a full height window from side to side, top to bottom, and that the infill feature a Shopify finish to match the approved finishes around paint finishes around the building in lieu of an anodized finish.
Great, thank you. And Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thank you. And John, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Master.
Aye.
None in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
Right, that's approved. Please continue to work with the staff on those elements. And we'll now move to the next item.
And the next item is public hearing item number 3, LPC 23-09111, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 573, Lot 53, 17 West 9th Street in the Greenwich Village Historic District. This is an Italianate style townhouse built in 1854 to 55 and altered in 1918. The application is to construct a rooftop addition.
Hey, Commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing and the staff will be taking you through the presentation. Lacey, you now have control of the presentation. Please state your name for the record. You may.
Good morning, Commissioners. Lacey Williams, Preservation Staff. The item before you is 17 West 9th Street, located on the north side of the street between 5th and 6th Avenues in the Greenwich Village Historic District. For your reference, here is the existing conditions photo and the historic tax and designation photos. This property was recently before the commission at the public hearing of March 14th, 2023. However, the focus of today's proposal is to construct a rooftop addition. This item is before you because it does not meet the staff level rules because of the cumulative impact of additions with the previously approved rear yard addition. As a reminder, these are the existing conditions of the rear of the building, including the 2 existing rear yard additions at the roof of the rear L. The elevation on the left side of the screen is what was approved at the public hearing of March 14th, which included approving the reconstruction of the 3rd floor of the rear yard addition at the L, but not the reconstruction of the 4th floor addition. The rooftop elevator bulkhead will not be visible from public thoroughfares and was not before the commission at that time. The applicant is now proposing to relocate the square footage from the existing 4th floor addition to an occupiable addition at the roof, adjacent to the previously proposed elevator bulkhead. This is shown in the revised proposal on the right. No new square footage will be added. This is the approved building section with the outline of the existing 4th floor addition shown here for reference. And this is the new proposed building section showing the proposed rooftop addition. The proposed rooftop addition will be set back 9 feet, 10.5 inches from the rear facade. And the proposed materials will include beige finished stucco, black painted metal railings, and a black finished steel and glass window and door system. And the proposed bulkhead railings and flue extensions will not be visible from any public thoroughfare. The applicants are here to answer any additional questions.
All right, thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Okay, why don't we move to public testimony, and we may have questions for the applicant after that. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand so we can identify you, and I'll turn it over to Gregory Kalla to take us through the testimony.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We did not receive any signups in advance for this item, and I am looking through our attendees list and I do not see any hands raised. So I will just note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 2 recommends approval, and I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'd like to turn to the applicant team and ask if there's anything you'd like to add. I know that you have support from the community board on this. We don't seem to have any questions, but I'd like to give you that opportunity before we move to our discussion.
Thank you, Chair. We have nothing to add.
Okay, thank you. All right, Commissioners, so if there are no final questions, I'll ask you all to unmute so that we can close the hearing and begin our discussion. All right, and Commissioner Chen, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So move.
Thank you. And Commissioner Ginsburg, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the hearing's closed and we'll begin our discussion. So Commissioners, you may recall that about a month or so ago, we saw an application to replace an existing two-story sort of extensions on top of the rear L with a new two-story extension that was the same volume as the existing, but in a glass material. And we found that with that change in material, that only a one-story addition on the rear L would be appropriate. And if they wanted to keep 2 stories, they could either keep what they had or rethink material or configuration. And so ultimately we approved it with 1 story. And the applicants, since they are going to be removing an existing addition at the second floor of the extension on the L, the top floor. They would like to relocate that square footage to the roof. And at the rooftop, it is not visible from a public way and set back from the front and rear facades, and would otherwise meet the rules and be eligible for a staff level approval, except the rules don't allow the staff to approve a rooftop addition if there is a previously approved rear yard addition. So that is why this item is back before us today. But otherwise, this rooftop addition would meet the rest of the rules. So we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Lutfi, would you like to start this one?
Yeah, I guess I feel like it's really fine. The addition is not going to be visible. And it doesn't seem to in any way overwhelm the facade or the green space. So I can approve this.
Okay, thank you very much, Vice Chair Bland.
I would agree. I think that issue of overwhelm is the key here, and it's not visible, and I don't think it does overwhelm, even though it's two separate ideas.
Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
I can approve this.
Commissioner Chu.
I would agree. I think the reduction of the extra floor on the back and this discrete rooftop addition is appropriate.
Thank you. Commissioner Chapin.
I agree with the remarks of other commissioners, and I find this completely appropriate.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Agreed, it's appropriate.
All right, Commissioner Ginsburg.
Agreed, appropriate.
Commissioner Master.
Appropriate.
Okay, and Commissioner Chen.
Same here.
Okay, so we have a consensus to approve. Commissioner Lutfi, would you make the motion?
Sure. In the matter of docket 23-09-111, 17 West 9th Street, Greenwich Village Historic District, an Italianate style townhouse built in 1854-55 and altered in 1918. The application is to construct a rooftop addition. I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Greenwich Village Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the work will not damage or eliminate any significant architectural features, that the proposed rooftop addition will not be visible from a public thoroughfare, that the addition will be modest in scale and set back from the front and rear facades, thereby retaining a sense of the building's original form and massing, that the cumulative effect of the proposed rooftop addition in conjunction with the approved rear yard addition will not overwhelm the building or the central green space, and that the proposed work will not diminish the special architectural and historic character of the building or the historic district.
Thank you. And Commissioner Master, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right, thank you. John, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Vice Chair Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
You're muted.
Aye.
Yeah.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Goldblum.
Looks like he had to step away.
Oh, okay. Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Master.
Aye.
9 in favor, none opposed. The motion passes.
That's approved. Thank you. And we'll move to the next item.
Right, the next item is public hearing item number 4, LPC 23-05732. An application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 575, Lot 127, 56 West 12th Street in the Greenwich Village Historic District. This is a Greek Revival style row house built in 1843, and the application is to construct rooftop and rear yard additions and excavate the rear yard.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. Michael, you now have control of the presentation. You can just, perfect. Please state your name for the record. You may begin.
Michael Haverland, architect. Well, good, almost afternoon, commissioners. Thank you for your time. We are proposing work at 56 West 12th Street that includes, I apologize, a full facade restoration with a new stoop, a rear yard addition, as well as a pool, and also a rooftop addition. Importantly, our street is on our row house is on a street in the context of many larger multi-unit residential buildings as well as institutional buildings. We are fortunate to be one of 6 in a row of preserved 1843 era Greek Revival townhouses, and we are flanked by taller row houses to the east and the new school, larger institutional building to the west. In addition, there are several rooftop additions nearby and adjacent. Our massing shows that we are zoning compliant with the setbacks, rear garden area, and also the penthouse is 1/3 of the roof area below. Importantly, we are retaining the house as a multifamily dwelling, so there's no occupancy change. This diagram of the existing section and the proposed shows we are retaining 3 out of the 4 existing units, and these show their distribution. Importantly, this is an aerial photograph of our block. Again, we have many large buildings on our block. This is not an idyllic mid-block condition. There are very few shallow row houses left, as well as many rooftop additions on this block. Our proposed rooftop addition is not visible from any public thoroughfare, as evidenced by our mock-up and the subsequent supporting photographs. As well as diagrams showing sight lines from the extremes of any public thoroughfare, and it is clearly not visible. In terms of the facade, we've been working with Karina since we made a few revisions after the community board meeting where they had a few good suggestions for us, and we will continue to work with her on the details. In terms of the rear context, our house is not intact, and neither are any of our adjacent neighbors with the row houses of a similar scale. Each of our neighbors has a rear yard extension. One to the east extends much further back, and the others extend about as far as we're proposing our addition. And none of these rear elevations are fully intact. As you can see from these photographs, again, to reiterate the scale of large buildings around us and the fact this is not an idyllic garden mid-block condition. And some of our neighbors even have structures in the rear yard. Our analysis shows the extent of these additions and the many altered row houses, as well as the rooftop additions. And in fact, some of the additions extend almost to the rear yard lot lines. To zoom into our immediate context, we show that the primary bulk of our addition aligns with the existing rear yard extensions of the neighbors to the west and not quite as far as our neighbor to the east, as well as our rooftop addition is in the scale of other rooftop additions and artist windows in our context. So specifically with our rear elevation, we are retaining the top floor, and in fact, restoring the 3rd window opening to make it consistent with the historic version of the house. Although we are in fact making that also a door for access to the terrace for that specific unit. We also propose steel and glass with window panes similar to those of the existing historic windows on the front facade. And we step the massing back in order to break it down and transition as much as possible between the rear yard additions of our neighbors to the west and the one to the east. And then, of course, we also show the proposed pool. The drawings of the existing and the proposed also show that the amount of glass that we are proposing is not really, is pretty consistent with some of the amount of glass in the rear yard extensions that already exist in our nearby neighbors. And in terms of this series of, I'm not going to run through this section in the plans, but I just wanted to point out that in the sections, we deliberately are only doing minor excavation in the cellar that will not require any underpinning or modification of the footings or the party walls, so there will be no impact on our neighbors. Thank you very much for your time, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Yes, Commissioner Chapin. Diana, you're muted still. Just
Thank you. I see that you do have the square footages on a number of the part of the elevation, but I was wondering, what is the total square footage of the existing building? And then the square footage of the additions, not counting the pool, but the additions to the building. I see it says 25. For the, it's not clear, for the penthouse. Extension and the house altogether, what's the square footage of? You still have, I'm sorry, I may have to change. Can you hear me? I'm looking for the difference in the square footage of the original building and the additions to the building, not counting the pool.
Well, the existing floor is 3108 square feet and the proposed is 4391. So for a difference of 1,200 square feet for the additions, including the penthouse.
Thank you.
okay, Commissioner Goldblum.
Sorry about that. Doesn't a pool have to have 5 feet all around it? A private pool in New York City? It's like yours is jammed up to the side.
It is, and in fact, it's one of the things that came up with the community board, and I spoke with Karine about it, that it's desirable to also have 5 foot of garden buffer. So we actually plan to relocate the pool to the center for the 5 foot surrounding area for code and also for the garden buffer.
Great, thanks.
Of course, thank you.
All right, Commissioner Jefferson.
Okay, I have a question about the stepping typology. It's kind of a modern idea. Do you have any precedents of that anywhere else in this block or anywhere else in the village?
Well, we did include on our, one of the things we looked at, we researched thoroughly the rooftop addition precedents and also rear yard addition precedents. And we did include in the appendix a landmarks approved rear yard addition that did step back. And for us, importantly, because we are retaining the multifamily condition and not changing the occupancy, that each unit have access to outdoor space, which is really one of the primary motives for the stepping back, besides reducing the massing to help reduce the impact.
So there was this typology approved previously.
Yes, according to our research.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, any other questions? Let's move to public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand so we can identify you. And I will turn it over to Gregory Kalla to take us through the testimony.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We received a couple of signups beforehand, so we'll be hearing from them first. The first signup we have is Shannon Smiley from Village Preservation. So Shannon Smiley, I am promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good day, commissioners, and thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Shannon Smiley, and I represent Village Preservation. The height of the proposed rear yard addition at this Greek Revival style row house should be reduced by 1 floor so that the top 2 stories of the original rear facade are retained along this intact row. Village Preservation also has concerns regarding the extent of the excavation required in order to install the pool. The impact of this excavation work should be carefully considered. We believe a reduction to the length of the pool in order to set it further back from the foundation of the building may be advisable. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. And next up, we will be hearing from Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. So Lucy Levine, I am promoting you to panelist right now. So please state your name for the record and unmute your line, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. HDC finds the proposed rear facade to be 1 story too high, especially given that the 2nd floor bulk is without precedent in this row. Additionally, we feel the windows should be compositionally consistent throughout the rear facade. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for your testimony. And I'm looking through the attendees list now, and I do not see any other hands raised. So I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 2 recommends the following: approval of the front facade restoration and window, denial of the front steps unless it is determined that they cannot be redesigned to extend less far into the sidewalk, denial of the proposed ironwork and that it be more aligned with other district examples and include round newel posts as appropriate to the house, approval of the lift provided that a diligent effort be made to make it less obtrusive by relocating its mechanical tower away from the front of the basement window, approval of the non-visible rooftop addition and the cellar excavation, approval of the mass rear extension in the windows, and approval of the lap pool, noting that it occupies a modest amount of the garden and is not objectionably visible from the neighboring gardens. And with that, I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Thank you very much. Okay. So just to address some of the comments in the community board's testimony about the front facade, I would note that the front facade is restorative in approach, and the applicant is working with the staff to work within the rules for a staff level approval at the front facade. So the only portions of the application that are before us today are the rooftop addition, the rear yard addition, and the excavation. So I'd like to turn back to the applicant and ask if you'd like to respond to the comments relating to those aspects of the work.
Well, focusing on the rear facade, we believe we found examples where retaining the top floor and restoring the cornice and keeping the 3 historic window openings with historic wood windows and with the addition extending for the floors below is consistent with other approvals and in fact appropriate, especially for this block.
Okay. Commissioners, do we have any final questions? Okay, I am asking you all to unmute so that we can move to our public hearing. Commissioner Lutfi, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And as the applicant has presented, this is a proposal for rooftop and rear yard additions and some excavation. The block is a varied block with large apartment buildings, bigger row houses, and a group of smaller row houses. Within the immediate context, I believe that there are only 2-story rear yard additions that don't project out as deeply as the proposed, but it is also part of this larger context that's more varied. And then the excavation, the applicant has represented won't require any underpinning. With respect to the pool, the commission doesn't, or the the staff can approve pools in rear yards, provided they meet our standards for excavation and work in the rear yard. And so, as you know, we typically do require that there be enough plantable area, a 5-foot gap at the end, and sometimes around, to provide more plantable area that would retain sort of a green, the ability to grow something that would be consistent with the central green space. So those are the 3 areas of work that we're looking at, and we'll begin our discussion. Vice Chair Pland, would you like to start this one?
I will. I'll note, I love the block. It's one of the hallowed, wonderful blocks of New York City. I think my office was just down the street for about 28 years, so I know the block intimately. So I think the what's being done to the front seems appropriate to me, and I guess, as you said, is not really subject to our review. The rooftop addition, I think, is acceptable. I'm struggling a little bit with the 3 steps. I'm struggling a little bit with the third, that it's a 3-story addition, not a 2-story extension into the rear yard. I'm not particularly struggling with the fact that it is as far back into the lot as it is, at least on that lower level, because it seems to me it's kind of mediating between its 2 neighbors. So I'm not. I'd love to hear others, and we'll listen to others. But I'm thinking maybe the appropriateness would be to eliminate the next to top floor addition altogether, perhaps, and even bring out the second floor out to the level of the first.
Okay.
And I do think if we don't have 5 feet in the rear because of the pool, then we need 5 feet. The pool might have to be a little bit shorter. I just have forgotten what they said about that dimension.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner Goldblum?
Oh, this is an interesting situation. I'm going to come out as more accepting than Fred. That's a switch, I think. I think that it's okay as is. And the reason I think that is because of the overall block configuration. I think that we do have a sense of a row here, even though it's a broken, it's broken into by some apartment buildings and buildings with larger intrusions. But I think that given the fact that this donut is very variegated and even this row is very variegated, I don't think that this is inappropriate. It may be that the fact that they're maintaining multifamily is insinuating itself into my thought processes, which it shouldn't. But I do think it's appropriate as is. It certainly would be fine if others disagree to remove the second level, second floor extension. I certainly wouldn't object to that. Or to remove part of it. If you look at the building to the far left of the row, it has a partial second floor, like a kind of a tail, which might make for a nice bookend if they were to do that here. But I'm okay with it as is.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
Let's go to the rooftop addition. I can approve the rooftop addition. The backyard addition, the stepping, I think is a bit much. I'm not sure that I would eliminate the 3rd floor, but I do think that going back to the volumetric, not stepping, is appropriate. So I would feel more comfortable if the 3rd floor was eliminated, but I can accept it, and I think the stepping is not acceptable to me.
And so would you, if you were to support 3 stories, would you want the plane to come into the depth of the first, second, or first floor, third floor?
The second floor, it'll be volumetric,
Okay,
with just a very simple volume. And the window sizes are fine.
Okay.
Large windows.
thank you.
And the
Commissioner-
pool, I can accept the pool. I just think that the issue of the
5 feet.
relations to the backyard, the 5 feet.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg?
I tend to agree with Commissioner Goldblum that I can accept it as is. It may be partially because I think there is a programmatic logic to the stepping, but I understand that others may not feel the same way and flexible.
Okay. Commissioner Chapin?
Well, I kind of have a somewhat more negative view in general of the project because I feel that we're in this situation where you've got a lovely federal style building in the village, which is being asked to do an awful lot. And it's being expanded kind of in all directions. And I sometimes wonder why people, acquire a building like this for a purpose that necessitates a lot of expansion and interior renovation and excavation. However, I think that the rooftop addition is completely appropriate to penthouse. I think that addition to the back is feasible, but there should definitely not be 3 stories. Because it is next to some larger buildings, I think 2 stories, I guess, could be appropriate instead of 1. I don't think that the stepping should happen. It should be, the same on the 2 stories that I would think are appropriate. I think the pool is fine as long as it's, set adequately back from the building. It looked to me like that they have to excavate the cellar floor completely to lay a new floor, if I'm not mistaken, even though they're just adding a portion of the floor. And I obviously would just be concerned that we monitor this extremely closely, both the pool construction and any cellar construction, because of the age of the building, and just to make sure neither this building nor the adjacent building is affected. But so that's where I'm at on the project.
Okay, all right, and if it does help you feel any better or make a difference, this is actually not one of the early federal buildings that we sometimes see. This is a Greek Revival style building from 1840, built in 1843. So a little bit later, and we have approved
A little bit later, yes.
similar
Thank you.
additions on Greek Revival style buildings, as well as some excavation. We'll of course be very careful, but I think it's a good start that they're not required to do any underpinning. That's a good place to start. Commissioner Chu?
Thank you.
Wow, this is tough. I'm in general fine with the penthouse addition. I think that I do feel a bit uncomfortable about the way that the additions on the back are played out. And I'm trying to think what it is that makes me feel uncomfortable, because in general, I'm not opposed to the added bulk, considering the character of this backyard court here. But I think what troubles me is that because of the way the terracing occurs, the only existing fabric that remains is the top brick floor, and it gets almost lost in this language, so that I guess when I see additions to historic fabric, I look for, and I support even modern additions to historic work, but I want there to be a sense of what was there and what's added, so that there's some sense of dialogue between the historic building and the new addition. And in this specific design, I'm troubled because I feel like it gets lost and it doesn't regard it. And I feel like the existing fabric feels odd in this picture now, and I want it to be more evident. And therefore, I think that I'm not saying that the top floor needs to be eliminated to retain more fabric, but I do feel that the stepping nature troubles me. The massing is okay, but the fact that the existing fabric becomes lost in the overall picture is what disturbs me.
Right, it sort of reads as another step.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Commissioner Lutfi.
Well, let me just, I'll just quickly give my comments. So if you look at the backs of some of the other buildings on this block, which is on, I think, the next page, even though it's very varied, there is a little bit of rhythm here and uniformity in, I'm going to call it the donut. And my sense is, I'm talking about page 24. My sense is that what we're seeing for the most part is this sense of the original buildings, and that most of the additions are 2 stories, leaving leaving the top 2 visible. The very, very end, it looks like there's on the left side, it looks like there's an addition that goes up 1 more. So, floor. So my feeling is actually that when you look at this from other perspectives, and in addition to this one, that this is it's a bit much. Not only it's a bit much in terms of its scale, and it's a bit much in terms of the step back. So I would recommend that they also, these additions pretty much align, so that they push back the addition so that it aligns with what's around it. And in the ideal world, I actually think that top addition should come off, although I could go along with the rest, the other commissioners, if they think it's should stay. I'm okay with the rooftop. And it looks like there's going to be some changing in the location of the pool. So I think whatever has to happen around that should happen. And I would set back the excavation about 5 feet, as we do in many instances.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I get the feeling there's a lot of good comments, and so in general, I'm more I agree with the last comment that we should be consistent in pulling back at the rear yard, the 5 feet. We should be consistent with the all the applications. As far as the stepping back, I will leave it up to the majority to see how they best want to adjust this pulling back. I guess the sense there's a sense to pull back the at least one of the floor setbacks. So I will leave it to the majority to see what's the best way to handle this.
Okay, Commissioner Master?
Yes, I'll start with the rooftop addition. I think that's fine and appropriate. The pool, as everybody has said, I think we just need to relocate it a little bit to give the 5-foot barrier. In terms of the stepping, I agree with Commissioner Goldblum. I think that the reasoning for it was because it's a multifamily use. And I think that in terms of the rear yard, where it's set back, I think there was a slide that showed that other rear yard additions had been set back as far on the block. I think I recall that as one of the slides. So I'm okay with it as it is.
Okay. All right, so I think what we have some mixed opinions here, and I think what we'll do is not take an action today. We certainly have some who support it as is. I think we have a few others that would support the 3-story height, but with a simplified plane at the back, and thinking about what the right depth would be something I think we want the applicant to explore a little bit in this context. And then others who think that the height in addition is something that should be studied again within the context of the block. So we'll take no action. We'll ask the applicants to restudy their rear yard addition and to think about the comments we've heard today and to return as soon as they're ready. All right. Thank you. So that concludes our morning session. We're going to now break for lunch, and we'll come back at 1 o'clock. We have 2 items scheduled for this afternoon, and they were scheduled to start at 1 o'clock. So even though we're breaking a little bit early, we'll still resume at 1 o'clock for those 2 final items. So we'll ask all members of the public to voluntarily exit the meeting at this time so that you should you wish to return, you won't have any technical difficulties doing so, and we'll see all the commissioners by 1 o'clock. Thank you.